Good morning.
Good morning.
So I was finishing up a book, a novel that I was reading, and in the last page, a mother said to her daughter, "Love is the one thing in life you don't need practice for." And the quote seemed apt at the end of the book, and it tied it up nicely and tidily. And I thought, oh, how sweet. And then I thought, I think love does take practice. I think the kind of love we feel that I imagine mothers feel when their child is born and they first see them, I imagine there's no practice for that. And maybe there are other kinds of love that there's no practice for. Maybe we just feel that. When we have a new relationship, we meet somebody, and you're all in the throes of this new love. Perhaps there's no practice for that. But I think once we start venturing forward into these relationships, oh boy, do we need practice. Constantly. So this quote hit me because this past week, there's been a lot of statements and information about people's feelings about things that have happened in life that they end up having resentment towards someone or about something. I think all of us have been involved in an organization or a church where there's been a rift, a difference of opinion, and factions started to rise up. And you may even have whole sections of a congregation that go away. And maybe they start something else somewhere. But there's feelings around all of that. We all have feelings about things. But some of us sometimes, when we encounter something of difficulty, we hold on to the negative feeling around that instance, and resentment starts to pile up. And I think in those circumstances, love is calling us to practice again. Love is calling us to be something deeper than the easy kind of love that comes when people agree with us, or people do what we want them to do, our relations go the way we think they ought to go. When the stuff shows up, we talk about the stuff showing up because the stuff does show up, often. Whether it's in our families, or at work, or in any community that we're in, because where humans are, drama shows up. And the opportunity for resentment or something else can creep into the bones of the organization, can creep into the bones of the people in the organization. And then what do? Some of us are able to rebound. Some of us know how to find that place again where agape love, where divine love lives, and can find peace and can resolve whatever has happened. Can put it away, not just bury the hatchet, because as long as you bury the hatchet's still there. Sharp. Waiting for it to be unearthed. And from the reading I've done about resentment in the last couple of days, once you have a second instance of resentment, it just compounds the other one. And then we get those hair trigger responses, where the resentment's just there. And when the second person shows up and does something that disappoints us, we may pick up the old resentment that has nothing to do with them, and we're swinging the hatchet that we buried. And it just causes more stuff. And if we don't resolve it, if we don't let it go, if we don't heal it, it gets into our bones. Sometimes literally. Sometimes literally. It causes illness sometimes in some people. There's research now about the percentages of people who suffer from cancer who hold unforgiveness and resentment. And the numbers are staggering. It's close to half.
Wow.
Close to half have deep resentment somewhere. It's interesting what science is finding out about our emotions. We carry them in our bodies. And so it's not just good for our souls to heal. It's good for the body to heal something. To be able to not just bury the hatchet, but to somehow dissolve that hatchet. Melt it down. Alchemize it into something different other than what it is. I grew up in a family that was famous for sweeping stuff under the rug. We don't see it, it doesn't exist. But it still was there, and every time something else came up, that rug just got higher and higher and higher. And then you're bumping into it, and kicking it, and stuff like that. It gets crazy. And then you end up arguing about things that have nothing to do with what just happened. Right? This stuff just happens and piles up. And so we need to find some way to deal with the resentment and let it go. Let go, let God. Perhaps let God, then let go. Because maybe it's hard to let go until God is in the picture. Until we can forgive, until we can look at something and say, I don't want to hold this. Not just for the others, but for yourself. To look at yourself in the mirror and say, I just want to let this go, because if I carry it with me, I'm the one who suffers. Not the one that you would perhaps like to suffer because they disappointed you. So it was an interesting story. I read something, there's a writer who said resentment is like carrying around a big bag of manure. And as more resentment happens in your life, you either get extra bags of manure or the bag gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you continue to carry it, you continue to carry it, and you carry it, and you carry it, and you carry it, and guess who ends up stinking? The carrier.
Because when you heal your mind, you heal your body.
Yes. It's not the other person. What's the other adage? It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies or suffers from it. Stuff happens. As long as there's a human around and there's two or more of us gathered, there's a potential for something blowing up in our faces. And so we carry things and we think it's gone, but not really. And it does stack up unless you heal it, unless you heal it, unless you make a choice to not carry it and drop it. Heal it little by little, time after time. And say that there's a divinity in me that is bigger than this stuff. Because sometimes it's all about us, and at the same time it's not about us. So it's not just about the fact that we hurt, that we're disappointed, that somebody did something, said something, perpetrated something. Whether it was unfair or not, whether it really happened or not, or is it something that we made up because we don't really know the facts. A whole lot gets said and assumed these days, and people don't know the facts. Often in organizations, decisions are made and a few people know the facts, but not everybody. But everybody's got an opinion. And then we run off with our stories and we foment stuff. We add fuel to the fire by sharing what we think, sharing our resentment. And then we get to decide, are we going to continue to do that, or am I going to let it go? Am I going to drop the bag of manure? Use the manure to fertilize something. Fertilize something good, rather than carry it and you be the one who ends up stinking. And once it gets to stink too much, it's harder to get rid of. Harder to get rid of and eradicate it and free yourself from it. And it can cripple us and cause us to contract. And decades later, after something has happened, we still may carry something, thinking we're justified, and perhaps we are. Perhaps we are justified in being hurt. And stuff happens, whether intentionally or unintentionally, stuff happens. So yes, perhaps we're right. And we still get to choose whether or not to carry the resentment and to share it. Spread the stink around. I want to stink by myself. Come on, stink with me. I'm going to share it with the people I love. But isn't that what we do?
Yes.
Find somebody to call, guess what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can bring God into the picture. Bring our divinity into the picture. Bring our capacity for forgiveness into the picture. And yes, something happened. And yes, I choose to forgive. And yes, I realize something may happen that I don't have the facts about. And yes, because I know there are times I need to forgive, I need to be forgiven, I will now forgive. Because yes, there's sometimes I'm perpetrating something. And I need to ask for forgiveness. So I am going to extend forgiveness in this situation and every other situation that comes up. It's not easy to do, but I think that's what our divinity necessitates that we do. If we love unconditionally. Hard to do, so that statement about we don't need practice for doesn't work when the stuff hits the fan. Yeah, we need to practice. Practice over and over and over again, because it may be easier to forgive something if it's not somebody you love, but perhaps somebody you work with. But then when there's somebody who's really dear to your heart disappoints you, we still need to be able to forgive if we're going to set ourselves free. And like Vicki told us when she spoke that day about the mini-me's, to let go of those strings that tie us to the one who perpetrated something. Free them, free us. And then we get to move through the world in love. Call God in whatever way you need to call God in. Music, scripture, a positive book, affirmations, walk in nature, sit and meditate. Like I always talk about, feel your feelings. Let the sadness and the disappointment drain from you, out of your body. Let the sadness go. Call in love. If You can sit and just utter the name Jesus over and over and over again. Or the word peace over and over and over again. The Spirit of God now expresses through me as forgiveness and love, right here and right now in this situation. Find something to ground you and center you again in divine love. Because science is finding that resentment can kill. It kills not only our relationships, but yes, they're showing that medically it can turn against us in our bodies. We get to choose that. Choose freedom. Choose peace. We're going to watch a short 5-minute video. This is Leo Buscaglia. Wonderful. He died in 1998. He was teaching in the Department of Special Education at the University of Southern California in the late 1960s when one of his students committed suicide. She had been one of the sets of kind eyeballs, he called it, he always looked for in the large auditorium because her responses showed him that at least one student was hearing what he said. So the news that she killed herself had a great impact on him. This incident led him to form a non-credit class titled Love 1A. The class led the lectures and a manuscript loosely based on what was shared in those weekly classes. The book found a publisher and an author surprised to find that the simple title, Love, had never previously been claimed. He has been called the granddaddy of motivational speakers on television. His simple message delivered in a dynamic style made him a popular guest on television talk shows as well as on the lecture circuit. At one time, 5 of his books were on the New York Times bestseller list simultaneously. Let's watch this video. He talks about love and forgiveness. So if she can forgive, how about us?
Yeah.
How about us? There's stuff, and then there's stuff. I think most of us don't have stuff like that mother had. Our stuff pales in comparison. But look at the capacity for forgiveness that all of us have if we'll just dig deeply enough. If we'll open our hearts and minds wide enough. If we'll be courageous enough to let love in again. Have the courage to be courageous.
Have the courage to forgive.
Yes, the courage to forgive. It ain't easy. But if we're going to grow, if we're going to be the people, the divine spirits that we are, live in integrity, forgiveness is the only road. Stop burying the hatchet. Stop holding it in. Ask for forgiveness. Ask questions when stuff comes up. Find out the truth. Seek out evidence. And even if you still get disappointed, forgive anyway. Forgive anyway. Set yourself free. Set yourself free.